Hello, it's Friday, August 21st, 2 p.m., and we're going to talk about an exciting new wrinkle in the United States' offensive, yeah, offensive capabilities against foreign hackers and criminal enterprises. And we will throw you back a couple hundred years when the governors were facing enemies at sea and they had the options besides sending their own navy. They would issue what was called a letter of marque, and they would allow privateers to go out and raid shipping and do all kinds of craziness for them. And these were privately owned, privately financed, and privately crewed, but operating with government authorization against enemies of the state. Well, things have come around again, and we are now witnessing the birth of the American cyber privateer and perhaps the dawn of some composite warfare. Thank God America's finally getting into it. So here's what we're going to discuss, because on August 12th, President Trump issued a presidential memorandum establishing a program through which vetted American cybersecurity companies can be authorized to conduct operations against foreign cyber-enabled transnational criminal organizations. And that is a major departure from the traditional approach. And so it should have raised more eyebrows, but people were busy crying about some other shit. So for years now, when an American company was hit by ransomware or other cyber attacks, its job was primarily defensive. They had to hit you, and then you had to try to defend against the punch. Protect the network, patch the vulnerability, restore the data, trace the attack, and turn the evidence over to somebody at law enforcement who then throws it into a trash can. Maybe the government could identify the perpetrators. Maybe their cryptocurrency could eventually be seized. Maybe, right? Maybe you made the mistake of traveling to a country not willing to arrest them. But the victim generally couldn't go after the attacker. Using this new framework, approved private companies potentially can. And we're talking about more than simply watching cyber criminals. The memorandum establishes both cyber surveillance operations and cyber effects operations. Second category is more important. Cyber effects operations can include manipulating, disrupting, destroying. As we like to say, degrade. We don't destroy that much, but we will degrade and we will even destroy targeted computer systems, networks, infrastructure, or data. So in other words, the gloves have come off. That's the technical term. The United States is treating a mechanism for privately generated offensive cyber capability. So before you start clutching your pearls, there's an important distinction here. The administration has not told cybersecurity companies, if somebody hacks you, go hack them back. Companies won't get to choose their own targets. They must be vetted by the government, and individual operations require written federal authorization and direction. That makes a historical comparison with privateering, pretty interesting. That's how it came up. Somebody mentioned these were the new privateers, but said nothing else after that. So we did a little work, and here we are, right? A privateer wasn't simply a pirate who the government decided not to prosecute. A privateer operated under sovereign authorization against specified adversaries. And that's essentially the concept Washington is experimenting with in this case. Caveat, and I'll probably mention it again, 9 days from now, they will actually issue rules of engagement. They won't call it that, but it'll be the rules of engagement in 9 days. So if there was enough interest in this, we'll probably do something again in 9 days, telling you what the rules of engagement are going to be. Before you think they're out there listening to your porn fetish, they are not. The government is going to provide the authority and also identifies the permissible targets. A private company may provide some of the tech, people, and specialized capabilities necessary to attack that target. And that brings you into a larger strategic question, which is my favorite, composite warfare. And we've talked about this before, and it's been kicked around in certain areas. And the United States has kind of been a dinosaur when it comes to fighting wars for quite some time. By design, who knows, right? The basic idea is that you don't necessarily confront an adversary exclusively with conventional military forces. Instead, you combine whatever capabilities are most appropriate to that problem, which is different than fourth and fifth generation warfare, just so you know. But it can still be asymmetrical, big against small or small against big, whatever. And that might include military power. We may have intelligence, law enforcement, all the usual stuff. Cybercrime is almost tailor-made for this approach because the adversary itself is often a network. Okay, so instead of looking for a guy, we're after the whole network. Think about a major ransomware organization. For those of you who understand it more, good for you. Its programmers might be in one country, its servers might be in 3 others. Its financial operations may run through cryptocurrency exchanges scattered around the world. Its money launderers might have little direct contact with people actually conducting the attacks. And beyond all this sits an even more complicated question, which is, what relationship does the organization have with the government of the country where it operates? It may not. The government may simply tolerate it, and simply tolerating it is not going to work out for these people anymore. Corrupt officials can protect this all they want, but, your name goes in the hat, as we used to say. Or perhaps the organization occasionally does work for a foreign intelligence service. There's a lot of things that can be going on there. Okay, so why wouldn't the response be an ecosystem as well? Okay, meaning we would put together the same shit that they have. American intelligence is going to identify the network. Law enforcement pursues its members, Treasury attacks the finances, State Department, et cetera, and now an approved American cybersecurity force could potentially penetrate and disrupt the digital infrastructure, keeping the organization alive. And that's where this starts to look very much like what we call a form of composite warfare. But here's where things get a little complicated. Imagine an American cyber company receives government authorization to attack the infrastructure of a foreign ransomware organization, probably in Berlin. The intelligence looks solid. The target has repeatedly attacked American companies. Washington approves the operation. The boys light up the computers and they go in, and something unexpected happens. During the operation, new intelligence indicates the part of the supposedly criminal infrastructure is being shared with or perhaps operated in cooperation with a foreign intelligence service. Now, like the Germans, now we have a very different problem. The company has to know whether its existing authorization still permits the operation to continue, whether it must disengage, or whether responsibility needs to transfer immediately to a governmental cyber organization, whoever it is, the NSA. There's a million of them out there. Figure it out. Because an operation that began as an authorized attack against criminals could suddenly risk becoming an unauthorized attack against a force within somebody else's state. Nobody likes their secret police to have the electric turned off. And that could happen very, very easily, Turkey, and a lot of other countries out there that we deal with that are semi-civilized, and I won't mention anybody in the Eastern Bloc. And unlike many conventional military situations, these decisions may have to be made extremely quickly because computers move fast, right? And that means somebody needs to establish the rules. And that brings us back to this may ultimately be probably the most interesting part of the whole experiment. There's going to be a couple phases. The presidential memorandum establishes the broad boundaries. Justice and Homeland have been given roughly 60 days to establish detailed operating procedures. So from the 12th, today's the 21st, so they've got a little bit of time. How do you define the collateral damage? There's a lot of things that have to be decided here. I'm not going to give you staccato this, that, and the other, but you can imagine what can happen. And what happens when the cyber criminal you're attacking turns out to be connected to a foreign government, which can very possibly happen, especially in some of the countries that we aren't mentioning. Those aren't merely cybersecurity regulations. functionality is going to be at a premium here. Now, I'm not going to give any off-the-wall examples from things that have happened in the Middle East, but you can imagine that some hijinks could get up to, and a lot of other people could get blown up, possibly, if somebody makes the wrong decisions or the right people get blown up. Someone's getting blown up, but maybe just on blast, maybe not with a 500-pounder. So there is another reason that this development is going to deserve some attention. After the rules come out, we'll explain them. For readers interested in how the boundary, or people that are listening, how the boundary between government and non-governmental actors can become blurred in a modern strategic competition, which is what we like, I'd recommend to you, because he's a Penn State guy, not a UPenn guy, Nicholas, what is his name? Eftimiades? Something like that. How many guys can there be? Eftimiades. I'd seen him give a lecture, I guess it's a few years back, and he had Chinese intelligence operations, intellectual property theft. He knew everything these guys, they couldn't take a shit without him having a good idea that they were doing it, which in and of itself is pretty epic, right? He wrote a book called Chinese Espionage, Operations and Tactics. If you're interested, it's particularly useful because it's going to give you the intelligence collections don't necessarily involve any professional intelligence officers, which you're seeing now with Eric Swalwell getting stopped at the airport. They don't say where he was coming from or where he was going to, just that they took all of his stuff. Now, Eric is going to have a situation, because we can't comment, because we don't know he's actually a willing participant in espionage, but we know his penis was. And that his girlfriend, Fang Fang, definitely was vetted up by the People's Liberation Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines before she was sent on that suicide mission to Swalwell's bedroom. Now, if he continued to give her things, probably knowing that, his personality alone wasn't turning her on, but, blueprints to our new missiles and jets were, he's going to have a lot of explaining to do. But it has been going on for years. There is going to be issues like him. There is issues amongst major defense contractors, Lockheed Martin. Motorola was involved. Lockheed Martin and Motorola were both involved, since we'll go into this one last time. Fred Thompson, the actor, was a senator. He ran an investigative committee looking into bribery of then Vice President Al Gore. It was called the Buddhist Temple Scandal. He was given a big bag of money, blah, blah, blah. Around the same time, the Chinese had the Long March 2 rocket, which was not working correctly and had crashed and all this other stuff. Maybe it blew up, maybe they blew it up, but somehow or another, through all this rigmarole, the United States, Lockheed Martin, Motorola, and there's one or two other companies, went over and fixed the guidance system on the Long March 2 missile without any oversight from the United States government. Can you imagine that? So we fixed an ICBM so that it could target the United States. Ostensibly, it was to use it so it could go up and launch space satellites. But we launched so many satellites out of there that we had to go to Kazakhstan instead, right? So who's kidding who? That story alone, people should have died. And instead, Fred went back to doing Law and Order, and nobody said shit about it. It happened. Look it up. So you can see that these kind of things will also pop up when these guys are out there busting up everybody's old email collections, right? But anyway, let's see what happens. We've got some days. We'll see what the ROE is. But I'll tell you what, it's a good sign, because we were just taking it in the ass constantly from these foreign cyber guys, because the people working, I hate to say, governmental level on certain jobs is not the highest caliber guy. Not always. Sometimes yes, but not always. And then even if they are good, sometimes you have a shit manager. The G levels does not actually go by merit. So there we have it. Once again, 220 It's a beautiful day out if you want to go out in 140-degree weather. And otherwise, that's all we have for you. Have a good weekend, and I will talk to you later.